Okay, this evening is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's the start of the month of Nisan. And the 15th of Nisan is the holiday of Passover. Pesach in Lashon HaKodesh, in Hebrew. Okay? And one of the salient aspects of Passover is that you do not eat bread. Okay? And it's a curious thing that I checked the Chumash, I looked in the concordance, and the Chumash nowhere seems to actually say you cannot eat bread. What it does say is you cannot eat chametz. Now, what is chametz? It's basically grain that has risen through fermentation. Now, that's bread. Okay? It's also cake. The Chumash also says that you should eat matzah. You must eat matzah at least on the first night on the Seder. Okay? And the issue of matzah is that it is flat. It's made from a dough that hasn't risen. Okay? And the idea is that when you're in a hurry to get out of a really bad situation, you drop everything and move. So if you don't wait for your bread to rise, you eat it while it's still flat. Okay, that's the idea of bread, the prohibition on bread, in the requirement of eating matzah. It's a testimonial of the children of Israel leaving Egypt and a reenactment to a certain extent. The testimonial aspect is that people will say, hey, you're not eating bread. That's peculiar. Why are you acting in such an unusual way? And you'll say, because when the Jews left Egypt, they didn't wait for the bread to rise. And Egypt was the place of slavery. We were going to freedom in the land of Israel. And slavery is bad, and freedom is good. Okay? Now, getting back to the issue of chametz and bread, lechem, and matzah, you start saying, well, what exactly is chametz? Bread, cake, yeah, well, that's clear. Can't get away from that. It's bread and cake. They really do rise as a result of dough. What about crackers? I mean, after all, there is flat as matzahs, and if you look into the law, and you'll see that when making matzah, they require that from the time the water is mixed with the flour until the time it is put into the oven, that it's less than 18 minutes. And the reason for that is after 18 minutes, dough is assumed to have risen. Now you can say, well, what about crackers? They can be baked pretty quick too. And someone might say, well, you can eat crackers on Passover. And when you start getting into noodles, you say, well, they also may not have been be more than 18 minutes. They do expand when you boil them, but it's not the same as that. As bread expanding, and even when you consider cake, it's a liquid type dough. It's rising in the oven while you're baking it. So where do you put the line? And you can't really get away from the ban on bread and cake. If you eat bread on cake on Passover, you are not fulfilling the mitzvah in the Torah. The other stuff, you can debate about it and you can expand on it. The word chametz refers to fermentation. Beer ferments, and the Mishnah says, well, beer and whiskey, they're grains, okay? They are forbidden on Passover because you might get confused about it. And the word chametz actually does, and one of the words, uses of it is fermentation. Things ferment, okay? It also means things get stale. Okay? The idea of getting rid of your stale stuff because spring is coming and you're starting anew. You're starting fresh. The world is fresh. You are fresh. Got rid of the garbage. Okay. You also have other things that are customs where you'll have people who actually filter the water coming out of the faucet. And you also have opinions widely accepted and done that peanuts are forbidden because they are like grains, corn oil, corn syrup. And when you start getting into this thing, what you'll find is that you'll become a very wise person about a variety of subjects, just learning what is chametz, what is bread, what is matzah, and trying to make a distinction what you're going to permit or forbid on Passover. Now there's a downside to this, that instead of clarifying the issue, you can confuse the issue, especially if you have a dirty sense of humor and you're using all sorts of spurious comparisons and sophistry and at the end mockery as well. And at the end of the day, you don't know your right from your left. You'll still know that bread is forbidden on Passover, so can't escape that. Now, I remember having the Seder when I was a kid until I was an adult. My father's home, we always had non-Jewish guests, friends of the family, who really did want to participate in the Seder. They enjoyed it immensely, were greatly honored to have been invited and to have participated, and it remained a good experience. Later on, I learned that the Seder, in fact, was the Last Supper of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, the issue of Jesus is a difficult one for Jews. And the relationship between Christianity and Judaism is difficult. And the relationship between Passover and Easter can be extremely difficult, even though they are very similar. If you take a look at the liturgy of the Easter service, it's about the Exodus from Egypt, and it's at the same time, specifically because Jesus died, or he was basically arrested after the Seder, and then he was condemned by the Sanhedrin, then he was executed by the Romans. Not a good day for anybody on that one. A very black day, in fact. And after that, this is according to the Gospels, simple reading of them, he was resurrected. He was resurrected after, I think it was 11 days or a short time, and he met with his principal students, his disciples. And Easter is a testimonial to that, the resurrection of Jesus. Again, it's the idea of a testimonial. And growing up, had friends, and they would often ask me questions about religion, specifically because I was Jewish, and they also respected me personally, and they wanted to have my opinion. And later on, when I was in college, they specifically engaged me in conversation about Jesus. And it was a lengthy conversation, a lot of issues. It wasn't really lengthy. What I basically said to them, because they noted that I knew really very little about Jesus, they pressed me about that. I said, well, my knowledge of Judaism is inadequate, and I should really learn, if I'm going to make a major effort to understand these things, I should learn about Judaism before I start learning about religions that are not my own. And they were pleased with that answer. And then I went to yeshiva and moved to Israel, and I studied for a period of decades, and all that time I still had my non-Jewish friends engaging me in conversation about religious issues, and at times Christmas and Jesus would come up, and my approach was a total blank. And then a peculiar thing happened to me, and it was that the Jewish studies started becoming redundant and boring. I consider that amazing. And my conversations with my non-Jewish friends, there was an irritant that was emerging. It was just over the horizon that I didn't know anything about Christianity. I didn't know anything about Jesus. So I said, look, this is going to become a problem if I don't do something about it. And what I had to do was read the Gospels. And I did. And what I found was basically, I consider it to be a lost Jewish book, and I could understand why it was lost. Unfortunately, Jesus wasn't the first of the wise and righteous among the Jewish people to have immense problems with the Jews, especially religious Jews. And what he was saying, and this could be extremely irritating was that you had to view yourself as a child of God to get Jewish law right. And the whole story of him, perhaps his whole life, was about, you could sum it up, it's a verse, I think it's in Deuteronomy 14, chapter 14, the first verse, where it says, children you are to Hashem. It uses, that's what it says, children, it says banim, sons. You are sons of God. Okay? And then it continues, you will not gash your head for when you're mourning for the deceased. Okay? This is not the proper approach for someone who is a son of God. And basically that's what the book was about. And this is why I'm getting to the point why I'm talking about this right now. I started also to listen to various Christian videos, and what was coming across on them was a frustration and resentment of people who loved Jesus towards the Jews, because they really absolutely refused to give the gospel serious consideration, okay? And creates anti-Semitism. So as a result, that's why I'm talking about it right now. And when you're talking about Passover, it is legitimate for non-Jews to be celebrating it. I would say that the main difference between a Jew celebrating Passover and the non-Jew is that if you look into the idea of being a nation of priests, you could say, well, it's a Jew's job to celebrate the holidays. And a non-Jew's I wouldn't go so far as to say he should, but he can do so if he wishes. If he finds it enlightening and pleasurable, then by all means do so. But for a Jew, you are required to do it. That's your job. You're the rabbi. You're the priest. You're a nation of priests. You have to keep these holidays. You have to make this testimonial. Wishing all my friends to say in Israel, Chag Kosher V'Samech, a happy and kosher holiday. Thank you.